Hello, everybody. Denise, are we ready to get started?
Maybe give another minute.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Welcome, everybody. We're going to get started in just about a minute. Just waiting for some folks to get in through the waiting room. All right, Denise, you tell me when you want to start. We can wait another minute or we can get going.
I think we should roll, Michael.
Okay. Well, greetings, everybody. We'll roll. I'm Michael Wexler from the Institute of Jewish Spirituality and Society. I want to welcome everybody to our monthly Verbringen, or gathering of like-minded souls, as we like to call it. Verbringen is a Yiddish term for uh, a gathering. And if you've ever seen any Verbringens on YouTube, it's kind of a party, but we'll try to keep our partying to a minimum since it's only daytime in most places for where people are watching. That shouldn't stop us, though. So, the Institute of Jewish Spirituality and Society, our mission is to advance scholarship and social transformation, bringing Jewish spiritual knowledge to bear on the toughest challenges of contemporary society. We like to dig back into the indigenous wisdom of Jewish spirituality and mysticism and find these hidden gems that we can pull into the modern world to help us in our everyday. In our Verbringens, we like to have interesting people come, and it's our host will tell us more about it, but it's a place where everyone can participate, casual, interesting, free form. Without further ado, Professor Ariel Mays is going to take it from here. He's a senior scholar in residence at the Institute and a professor of religion at Stanford University. Ariel.
Thanks, Michael. Wonderful to be together in such difficult times. I feel kind of like in when dark clouds are on the horizon, we should keep our partying to a maximum rather than a minimum, since Verbringen comes from a word that means to, yes, to come together, but also to connect and to reinforce social bonds and recreate the possibilities of new connections. Um, it's a great honor to have two really wonderfully distinguished guests with us today. Um, our usual format, and I think we'll follow this today, is that we'll ask our guests to speak, to reflect, to think with us for just a bit, and at the conclusion of their words, or if they're amenable to it even during, we'll be able to ask questions and to create a lively conversation around the issues on the table. So without further ado, I think I'll ask everyone to remain on mute, but to come off mute or to use the chat in a lively way to bring forward questions, ideas, or connections. I think I will introduce our two wonderful speakers. We're lucky to have with us Kate Miriam Loewenthal, who is officially retired, but still does a little writing, research, and speaking. She's married to Tali, who we also have with us here today, and they have a wonderful large family. She has held posts in many different universities and has written 6 books and numerous scientific papers, primarily about the interface and relationship between religion, culture, and mental health. Naftali Loewenthal, Tali, is one of the great scholars of Jewish mysticism in our day. He serves as an associate professor in the Department of Hebrew and Jewish Studies at University College London. He's written many, many articles and 2 books of significant distinction. The first, Communicating the Infinite, The Emergence of the Chabad School, a book that I read when I was an undergrad, then I reread when I was a graduate student, and I continuously reread with great admiration. And another, Hasidism Beyond Modernity, a collection of essays more recently published, another wonderful tome. So without further ado, Kate and Tali, I'm going to pass the ball to you with a great sense of gratitude that you are willing to come and bring with us today about the question of Jewish spirituality and mental health.
Hello, good evening. I can't see, I can see, hello, some people who've come to take part in this Verbring. So I'm looking forward to your comments. I was asked to speak, and so was Tali, and I was told I had approximately 10 minutes, and so here I go.
Hold on. Denise, I need to be able to share the PowerPoint.
Sorry, go ahead, please.
Thanks.
So this is a short, hopefully no more than 10 minutes, and perhaps hopefully much less, about my work on religion, Judaism, spirituality, and mental health. I have done a lot of work. Academic careers last approximately 40 years.
Well,
if you're not,
you're a very active person.
and if you're not bringing in the research money and you're not churning out the scientific papers, then they don't want to know you anymore. So in order to put bread on the table, off I went. And I became very interested in the psychology of religion. Now, most people have got wonderful intellectual stories to tell. I haven't. I was walking along the university corridor one day on my way to give a lecture, or just having given a lecture, and I met my boss. And he said, "Kate, you're religious, aren't you?" And I said, "Yes." And he's pulled out from under his arm a paperback book called Psychology of Religion. And he said, "I've just met the head of the Religious Studies Department at King's College in London, and they're looking for somebody to teach the psychology of religion, and I thought you might like to do it." So I said, I don't know anything about it. And he waved the book under my nose. He said, "Here, take this. This has got everything you need." So that's how I got interested in this area of psychology, which had previously been unknown to me, and it was actually unknown to, I would say, 99.9% of people who study or work in psychology. It wasn't that difficult to get something going, and it became increasingly popular and widespread. And I continued to develop work on the interrelations between spirituality, religion, and well-being. And I was particularly interested in the fact that the previous studies had, on the whole, not looked at the differences between different religious traditions. If they looked at the effects of religion, religion was religion in America, which is Protestantism plus maybe, if you're lucky, a few Jews. And so I decided to include Jews and other religious groups as well, in order to show that there were effects there that needed to be examined carefully. Published a lot of papers and books, and looking at that morass, I decided that I would like to say a few words about 3 studies in particular. Here they are: religion, family size and well-being, Shabbos and the benefits and costs of keeping Shabbos, and finally something on trauma and therapy and their relations to religious trust and faith. Can I keep to 10 minutes? Tali, you're timing me. I think the thing that outsiders notice about Orthodox Jews is the large families. And when people ask me, so people I met for the first time, and they say, "Got children?" And I say, "Yes." And they say, how many?" And I tell them, and they say, "Are they all normal?" So I said, you know, I spluttered a bit and said, "Yes, basically, Baruch Hashem, we're fine." It's but nevertheless, it was thought to be an established social scientific fact that a large family, i.e. more than 3 children, the children were going to be disadvantaged. They were going to be backward educationally. They were probably going to be more behaviorally disturbed, and it was not a good idea to have a large family. So one of my aims was to look at well-being and other factors in Jewish families in Stamford Hill. And so that was one group of studies. And we showed that, you know, thankfully, the mothers were not depressed. They were supposed to be scientifically. That was, you know, you started off having more than 3 children, but then you were doomed to fall into a clinical depression. But I was able to show, with the help of some wonderful colleagues and collaborators, that this wasn't the case. I did find that the men needed some attention. They're totally overlooked in the studies of family life, and I also discovered that the children needed some attention. Nobody was very interested in what they were up to. So that kept me a bit busy, and it should have kept me a bit busier. But meanwhile, I'm going to go on to my next topic, which is the benefits and costs of keeping Shabbos. This, I should say, was not actually my idea. It was idea of Simon Dean, a colleague who I've worked with and collaborated with for many years, including running a journal called Mental Health, Religion and Culture. And Simon said, let's interview lots of people about Shabbos and see what they have to say about why they like it. Or is it just a mass of rigid rules and restrictions? So we decided to do a so-called qualitative study, which involved extended interviews, and we got altogether 13 people who all said they kept Shabbos. We didn't ask how much or why or when. We just got 13 people who kept Shabbos and interviewed them and asked them questions about what they liked and or found difficult about keeping Shabbos. So in brief, they liked keeping Shabbos. They loved it. It was seen to be a way of opting out of regular weekday concerns and of focusing the mind on higher spiritual and worthwhile matters. And so it also enabled people to deepen and expand their close relationships, particularly within the family, but also with the wider family and with guests and friends and so on. There won't really seem to be any disadvantages. The so-called restrictions were not apparent to the people that we interviewed, and they said the main difficulty they had was trying to explain to non-Jewish and non-religious friends and acquaintances why it was that they needed to so strictly keep to the time limits that were required for Shabbos. And so explanations to non-Shabbos observers were the difficulty of providing those explanations was the chief difficulty that people experienced. Otherwise, Shabbos was extremely important in deepening the person's beliefs and the views of the world. Finally, I wanted to mention some work that I've been doing over the last few years in a form of trauma therapy. And the reason I'd like to mention it is that it had some unexpected effects, which I wasn't looking for, and they certainly weren't a focus or a topic that was supposed to be considered at all in doing this therapy, and that is religious faith, religious belief, religious trust. People started to say to me, since I had this therapy, I find that my religious trust, emuna, has been greatly strengthened. I won't here go into details, but I will say it was. I wasn't expecting this. I wasn't surprised. And one of the next things in Mitzvah I would like to do is to look more closely at people's experience of the deepening of their emunah as a result of having undergone trauma therapy. So those were my particular 3 topics that I wanted to produce in order to illustrate some of the kinds of work we've been doing, but lots of other work too, looking at mental health, particularly in the Jewish community.
I just wonder if it might be an idea for Ariel, if people who have any kind of question to address to Kate at this point.
Sure, that's a wonderful idea. Perhaps we can take the next 10 minutes, give or take, and reflect on what Kate has shared with us today. I have some questions. I'd love to hear from others also. Perhaps just to get the ball rolling, I'll ask 2 questions, which is, one is, ironically, or perhaps not, academic life has its own kinds of orthodoxies, which are often entrenched even more so than what feels like religious belief. I see what you've shared with us today is that the work that you did disproves a number of different assumptions that people had about religious people, religious consciousness. Did you meet with resistance from colleagues and others when you were sharing these findings?
That's such an interesting question, because my main feeling over the years has been that people have just felt they won't get anywhere arguing with me. and perfectly easy to defend the position that you can, scientifically you can investigate anything, and why not investigate religion? And so nobody's going to, or I found that nobody's really going to dispute the usefulness of investigating this topic. It was a bit hard to get, as you probably are aware, in academic life, in order to keep going, you've got to keep applying for research funding. And it was interesting looking at the organisations that were prepared to fund this kind of research, and there were such organisations. And so as far as the university establishment was concerned, where I was working, as long as I kept that money rolling in, there were no complaints. So that's a if you abbreviate what I've said, it's a rather cynical answer, but that is academic life.
At the same time, I'm wondering, are there elements of Jewish spirituality that you have found particularly resonant in your work, or that you're interested in focusing on? These categories, Shabbat, Emunah, they're very large. Are there certain, I guess I would say, like subspecies within that, modes of approaching Emunah, something from your own background in the world of Chassidut that you find particularly relevant and important?
Ooh. As you were wording your question, I was thinking, what a huge topic. and I'm not quite sure where or how to begin, and isn't an easy opening. What's not apparent from my selection of those very three specific titles is that I started off doing replicating work that had already been done on depression, depressive illness, and lifestyle factors in people's lifestyle, and so in terms of thinking of methodology, it wasn't hard because I was supposed to faithfully follow the methodology that had been used by my predecessor in looking at other social and religious groups, and looking. So the academic colleagues and well, I can't think of the right word. Mentors, people who were supposed to evaluate what I was doing and decide on its worth, didn't really have any criticisms, and the religious and spiritual issues that came up in the research just came up because I was choosing to focus on orthodox and sometimes not so orthodox views. Okay, so I could go on and on and on about.
There's a question in the chat. Can you say more about the kind of therapy you were doing where Emunah increased? Were your patients religious? And Michael says that was his question as well.
Oh, right. Well, that's easy to answer, and I hope I can do it quite quickly. I'm not a therapist. I've taught a lot about psychotherapy as an academic because I felt that psychodynamic therapy and wasn't being suitably handled in the courses that I was involved with, and various other. But I never trained. I never did a clinical training. A lot of my research was on clinical topics, but one of the people I collaborated with, Caroline Lindsay, was an eminent psychotherapist, and she appeared one day very excited and said, "I've just trained in EMDR, it's wonderful." Now, if anybody has ever met this lady, they would know that she's the toughest nut that anybody ever tried to crack, and to see her so excited and positive. So I asked her more about it, and I decided to look into seeing whether I could have a go myself. The form of training is acronym EMDR, which stands for Eye Movement Desensitization and Reprocessing, which is a most lengthy, useless, uninformative title because you don't even have to do eye movements at all. It's the main thing about it is that it works. You get people who are suffering from post-traumatic stress disorder, which is a terribly distressing and unpleasant condition, and often can shorten a person's life, God forbid. And for many people, I can't say absolutely everybody, but for many people, this is an effective form of therapy for alleviating the unpleasant symptoms of trauma. And I basically was making it known that I was willing to do this therapy. I was working with paying patients, but I was I was working with paying patients and but trying to keep the costs much lower than was normal, and not selecting people for religiosity. And what I found was that the people who'd had any kind of religion in their upbringing, whether they were Jewish or not, generally religion came up in the therapy. And if they hadn't had any religious upbringing, religion didn't come up in the therapy. And when I asked about the revival or strengthening of religious faith, emunah, the people who had no religion in their upbringing there was nothing to revive, and unfortunately, this wonderful spiritual awakening was confined to those who'd had even a shadowy, faint thing in their element of spirituality in their upbringing.
Here we have another question. I also wonder if there's quantitative evidence that belief in something augments well-being and mental health. I suspect there must be. But what does this mean for atheists, Tali?
Look, I can give a very short answer here, because otherwise I could go on and on and on and on all evening. Basically, virtually every piece of research that's been done on any kind of belief suggests that there's an association. It's not a strong association, but it's very, very, very reliable association between whatever kind of religion, spirituality, whatever, and different measures of well-being.
The positive correlation.
A positive correlation, yes.
So my comment about atheists is that in order to be an atheist today, you really have to believe in atheism.
Lovely. Others from the community who have come? Thoughts, questions, wonderings?
There's actually a question in the Q&A as well. Ariel, do you see it?
Yeah, it's the same question that
Oh, okay.
also, yeah, thanks so
Oh,
much.
okay.
I think if we have nothing further now, then Tali, we can pass the baton to you, and then we will ask you questions, and then we'll engage in a conversation with both of you as well.
Okay, fine. So, 1 second. So that's me. So what I want to speak about is an aspect of our life and work over the last 30 years or more, where my dear friend Rabbi Shmulu and I came in contact with Dr. Joseph Burke. He is the author of the book Mary Barnes' 2 Accounts of a Journey Through Madness, and a very esteemed psychotherapist. Therapy with compassion, I think, might partly define his approach. He worked with Ronnie Lang. He was an incredible figure. And he began having a Tanya class in his home that Shmuel and me would give. And he became very, very close friends with us. He and his wife Shri. Later he married Shri in Jerusalem, and we were there. Shmuel and I were there, and then they were very good friends of ours. And he's unfortunately passed away, but Shri, we still have this group, a monthly group where we study Santanya and then discuss it in terms of the therapy process. And so the idea is it's a group of therapists discussing Hasidic teachings. Now, I'd like to take a little bit of Tanya. It's the part of Tanya part 2, Gate of Unity and Faith. And it says there, it's got a little introduction in Hebrew, and the translation is, let us understand, at least in a small measure, the statement of the Zohar, that Shema Yisrael, the first line of the Shema, is Yehuda Ilah, the higher level unity, and Baruch Shem, that's the second line of the Shema, is lower level unity. Now, what exactly is meant by upper level unity and lower level? We could see this as 2 modes of contemplation. The upper level, the upper unity is there's no world, only the divine, what's called in the academic world a cosmism. And it's a way of understanding Rabbi Shneor Zalman's teachings, that when you consider the idea that there's a divine life force which flows into everything and creates it and makes it exist continually, and if you start thinking about this, it means, I mean, if you look around the room where you are at this minute, and you imagine in your mind's eye that everything is really there because there's a flow of divine life force flowing into the table, the walls, the chairs, the ceiling, everything around. And if you happen to be listening in a forest, in the trees, the sky, the waterfall. And then if you look a little bit deeper, so then what is there? There's really only the divine. And you can come to a cerebral position where you don't see a world. There's only the divine. But then there's another perspective. And it's an interesting question whether this is the perspective before that you see a world, but it is, or it should be, an expression of the divine. Is it a stage before or is it a stage after? That you go to the upper unity of Shema Yisrael, Hear O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one, and then you go beyond that to see, you know what, there is a world, and that world should be an expression of the divine. Now, that's a basic concept from Tanya. And Rabbi Shneor Zalman's son, he wrote a tract, Kuntras Hitpalut, Tract on Ecstasy. The earliest manuscript was dated 1814. This is a later manuscript. It's now, of course, been published quite a number of times. And then we have a page of the prayer book with Hasidic teachings, which Rabbi Dov Ber published, where you see a single line of the daily prayers, Baruch Shama v'haya olam, blessed be he who spoke and the world came into being, surrounded by Hasidic teachings by Rabbi Shneor Zalman and Rabbi Dov Ber. Now, so that gives a thrust of contemplation, hitbonenut. And the way that this hitbonenut might be manifested is expressed in this painting by Zalman Kleinman. He lived in the 70s. He was particularly active, 70s and 80s. And here we have a painting of a synagogue. I believe it's actually a synagogue that was in Carroll Street, the Baumgarten Synagogue. That's what it looks like inside. Out through the windows, maybe looks more like Kfar Chabad in Israel. Now here in this synagogue, there has been a regular Shabbat morning minyan, a Shabbat morning service, but now it's the afternoon, and the name of the painting is Shabbat Afternoon. And the people who are taking part in the synagogue, they've either gone home or they've gone to another room where there's a Kiddush, also a Verbrengen. And here there's a group of what we might call contemplatives left behind, being watched by a little boy who is like the artist. He often appears in his pictures. And we have different styles of contemplation. And what I want to try to do is sort of link these to possible mental states. So we have this figure here. Now we could imagine him actually, he's holding up his hand. I'm sorry, the painting's not as clear as it could have been. He's holding up his hand as if he's like, he's singing. He's singing, he's an enthusiast. He's filled with enthusiasm. He's singing the words of the prayer in a deeply enthusiastic way. And maybe that's the way he's going to go through all the prayers on this the Shabbat morning service. Then he'll come home to his wife and she'll say, "Where were you? I thought you said you'd be home by 2:30. So I did write a paper on wives' responses to men's contemplation in prayer. But that's him. Now then we have this person here. He's following a different mode of contemplation. Now, I think of this as Mittler Rebbe style, the second Lubavitcher Rebbe, like that tract on ecstasy that we saw. So tract on ecstasy talks about deeper and deeper and deeper thoughts without releasing it into an enthusiasm, an overt enthusiasm. It's as if you're going deeper and deeper into space, into spiritual space. And from various eyewitness accounts, if you speak to such a person, he won't hear you. He's in another world. And he might not come home at all on a Shabbat afternoon. I recently heard an interview with the son of a figure who was just like this. And the children never saw him on a Shabbat afternoon. He was in shul the whole time. Drunk with God, so to speak. So that's another style. And then we have a third style, is this gentleman here, who is pacing up and down with his talit over his shoulders, which is an indication he hasn't actually begun praying at all, right? The beginning of the morning prayer is that you put your talit over your shoulder. There's a brief verse that you say, and then you say a blessing and put your talit on like a prayer shawl. But he has not reached the point of beginning to pray. As I would understand it, he is trying to find the center point from which he is able to speak to God, and he hasn't yet found it. So he's walking up and down, thinking. I once interviewed an elderly Chassid who lived here in London. He's passed away long ago. And he said, what is contemplative prayer? A porveta mitan emes, a few words with truth, a few truthful words. So in order to speak a few truthful words, you need to find the point of truth in yourself. And that's what this gentleman is looking for. Incidentally, the painter, Zalman Kleiman, alav shalom, he painted another version of this picture where the clock, I don't know if you can see the clock very well, it looks like 10 to 2. So the clock in the second picture is much later, and the shadows are longer from the sun setting outside. And most of these people have gone, except for this figure who is still walking up and down, and he hasn't yet put on his talit. Now, how does that relate to mental health? So we've got the first figure who was praying with joyful enthusiasm, joy, freedom. Of course, might be manic bipolar. But the challenge to the therapist is to help the person see that his manic state is true. Who wouldn't be manic when you can see the divine revelation which is all around us in the world? The fact that other people manage to control this and go about their daily work, okay, so maybe they're less sensitive. You are very sensitive. Okay, so no wonder. That's. Then we have the second state. Quest for a deeper state of consciousness. Just a week or two ago, I showed that painting, a slide of that painting to a group of students at UCL. And one of them said, he looks as if he's in a catatonic depression. So it's very interesting that the person in the catatonic depression might indeed be in a very deep journey of himself or herself. Joe Burke was a therapist who could communicate with people who were in catatonic depressions. And that's something very remarkable. And we cannot take away the individual dimension of the person who is suffering from mental pain. As Joe would put it, There's no mental illness, but there is mental pain. And as therapists, one has to be able to empathize with that and help the person see the light in that journey, the radiance. And then we have the third individual who's walking up and down. He's looking for the search within the self, for the self, the point of truth. That actually reminds me of Franz Kafka, also looking for his truth, whether it's in the trial or the castle, finding where is he. And just to end with a little Kafka story that's well known, that there's the man who's trying to get in through the gates, and there's a guardian at the gates, and he won't open the door. No, sorry, the gate is open, but there's a guardian, and the man grows old, waiting at the gate in order to go through. And then finally he's very, very old, and the guardian is shutting the door. And the man says to him, "Why are you shutting the door?" He says, "This door was only for you. And now you're leaving, so I'm shutting it." Okay, thank you.
Thank you so much, Tali. We can solicit questions now in the chat. We can also have folks come off mute. You can raise your hand. I have a question which really came to the fore when I was hearing what you were saying. I think there's a lot of good that academic work can do, and there's a lot of good work that's done in the academy. It's also not a foregone conclusion that academic work is about helping people or about opening up ways that people can think about very pressing social issues or mental health issues. And oftentimes the study of Hasidism or other fields is very much within a kind of intellectual history or even within religious studies in which it is a, if not scholastic, it's held at far remove. For many reasons, this is not the way that you conduct your scholarship, although it's impeccable in its research. How do you navigate this within the academy and within fields where that is not a foregone conclusion?
You're making a very good point. And when I first graduated, I was very uncertain about the question of going on to a doctorate precisely because I saw the academic world as very sterile. And then eventually I did come back into it. And I suppose they put up with me. I remember we were sitting at some kind of a departmental meeting, and some senior figure from the upper ranks of University College opened the door and came into the room. And Ada Rappaport, Alea Shalom, she said, "Oh, and this is Naftali Loewenthal, our resident mystic." You know, he felt she had to make some sort of excuse for me. But I must say, only part of my work is in the university, thank God. I also teach in the Lubavitch Senior Girls School, for which I've been teaching there for over 50 years. And I must say, I get tremendous nachat from that, basically teaching the same thing that I do in university, only in a different way. And I have, I teach the pupils of my former the children of my former pupils, and grandchildren, and have a lot of nachat from all that. So, so it is, but the academic world itself, possibly in not always positive ways, does see itself as having to make some kind of statement about issues. And, from the beginning, going back to the 60s, or maybe for even before then, where there was Danny LaRouche, with university sit-ins. That was taking place while I was an undergraduate. And
I wonder if in some sense there's also been a turn in academic life, which, you know, as you said, has both positive and negative manifestations, in which there is a greater willingness to invite questions of spirituality into the room on a host of different discussions. One of the things that I've noticed during my time as a faculty member is that both amongst students who are really quite hungry for other ways of thinking, especially on the West Coast, where, you know, the the sort of like coal or ancient nucleus of kind of a religious background many of them don't have. They're really excited about the possibility that specific teachings and teachings from specific religious traditions can actually both broaden their intellectual horizons and deepen their own understanding of what it means to be a human being in the world. I think there's also a greater openness amongst certain faculty members to talking about these questions. I'm thinking about several books that were published in the late 90s and early 2000s about the return of religion to the academy and its the willingness to grapple with it. So we have three questions in the chat as I clock them. One for Tali, one for Kate, and then another one for Tali. Tali Rivka Slonim would like to know what it actually means to believe in atheism, following up on your dictum. Harry Stauber from Kate would like to know, does your finding that trauma therapy strengthened emuna in particular or spirituality, which might not necessarily be the same as that? Perhaps we can have you answer those two, and then we'll go to Garth's question.
okay, so let me just start with belief in atheism. I was giving a talk in Oxford Chabad House some years ago about the Orthodox view of evolution, and particularly the Lubavitcher Rebbe's thoughts about evolution. And the Rebbe believes the world is 5,785 years old, and it was created in 6 days, and all the different species of animal were created in 6 days, and how that fits with discussions about evolution. And I quoted various letters that the Rebbe had written to individuals about this question. And among the material that I looked at was a book by Richard Dawkins, who is a very, very strident pro-evolutionary thinker living in Oxford. And he wrote a book in which he discusses the question which Darwin himself had. How do you see an evolutionary track for the eye? The eye is a very mysterious organ, even the eye of an insect, let alone the eye of higher mammals. How do you see an evolutionary track for that? And there was this absolutely beautiful passage in Richard Dawkins' book where he says, yes, basically, what he was saying is, it's true, we can't see the evolutionary track, but you just have to believe it. So in other words, atheism becomes a religion with a beyond rational dimension, that you have to believe in atheism, just as you have to believe that the world's created in 6 days. So whether atheism provides the same kind of solace as religion, perhaps it does. Why did this terrible thing happen? Oh, it's just by chance. So the person is so comfortable with his belief that everything is by chance. He has no anxieties about the tsunami or whatever it might be. Yes, it's all happening by chance. But I'm not sure how that really plays out in the mental health world. Okay, so that's my answer to reference.
Wonderful. Kate, perhaps you could speak to this question of emunah versus spirituality and what the relationship is.
I need to see the rest of the question. Can you?
Right. Right. So does your finding that trauma therapy strengthens in time in particular, or spirituality, which might not necessarily be the same?
I haven't got the materials in front of me, and I'd have to look carefully at the words that were used in the interviews. But my overall view is that people were stating improved awareness of their spirituality, and Emuna seemed, from the discussions that I had, to mean the knowledge, the belief that one is being continually created, and that everything else is being continually created, and this is the way the universe runs. And
in other words, they're in the hands of God.
Exactly. Yes. I may be reading too much into what people said, but this is what and this is how they, saw the very often quite fragmentary snatches of more likely more fragmentary among the non-Jews, because the non-Jews didn't have the same kind of structured, coherent upbringing, and so they would remember little snippets of spirituality and spiritually significant events.
Interesting.
Your comments, Kate, about the way that they reflect on this process reminds me, I have a good friend at Stanford who teaches in the Department of Anthropology who does a lot of interviews with people who have undergone different kinds of both traumas but also religious awakenings. And sometimes she'll ask them, do you believe in God? And they'll say, no. And then she'll say, well, do you believe in a higher power? Oh, sure. Do you believe that that higher power influences your life? Absolutely. Do you believe that that higher power that influences your life can also be made present in your life? Absolutely. Can you hear that voice? For sure. I've several times. And the way that people code these experiences and unpack them come back to those kind of culturally specific languages that we were talking about earlier. And the questions are really flowing in, which is just wonderful. We have one from Garth about stillness of mind for Tali in the processes that you were describing. Garth has said that he's working through elements of the Tanya, or working through the Tanya, not seeing as much emphasis on that as he might perhaps expect.
Okay, let me just read this aloud, which will help me to understand what
Sure.
Garth said. Or maybe Garth would like to say it himself. Yeah.
So I'm just going to read it. So Tali, to what extent is stillness of mind important in the process of the figures that you described in the painting? And so I'm, studying the Tanya, but I'm not seeing a lot of emphasis on stillness of mind. And in particular, I think about the Kotzker Rebbe, who says, where is God? God is where you let God in. And if the nature of the mind is to spin, and the spinning mind, then the spinning mind can't let God in. And my final part of the question is, and Jewish meditation is not emphasized much in the observant world.
Okay, so there's really two questions there. So one is about stillness of mind, and the other is about the observant world at the moment. Now, it's true that in Eastern meditation, there is the attempt to have emptiness of mind. I think there's a Chinese word, wu wei, like no mind, stillness. But in Jewish thought, in Chabad Hasidic thought, let's say, the fact that the person is thinking about something which is quite tangible, you could write down what he or she is thinking about in terms of sfirot, divine emanations, worlds. There is a sense that within those cerebral concepts, there is something within. And what is within is godliness. There's actually a beautiful letter that Rabbi Joseph Isaac, the sixth Lubavitcher Rebbe, wrote to a young woman who called Chayasima Mikhailova. She was probably 18 or 19. She lived in Riga. And she was asking about what she should do about the emptiness of action. And he responded with an incredible letter, which talks about the way within any Jewish idea, like a word from, a phrase from the Torah, in the beginning God created the world, whatever it might be. There are deeper and deeper and deeper levels till you get to that which is beyond words and beyond concepts. And I think there, Garth, you might find the stillness that you're talking about. And what Rabbi Joseph Isaac is trying to teach her is to be able to turn on this faculty at any moment and to be able to perceive the world around her and what she says in prayer or in Torah study from that inner infinity. So I'm not sure if that helps you. You see, the words of Tanya, again, it depends how you hear the voice. And something that helped me personally understand Tanya was looking at a book called Ma'amarim Ketsarim, Brief Discourses by Rabbi Shner Zalman, the same author. And they are like fire. They're brief. There's like, one or two paragraphs long. And you suddenly realize that that fire is the way he was expressing himself all the time. And when you then open a page of Tanya, which sounds very controlled and rational, it's actually got that fiery dimension within it. And that takes you beyond the construct, beyond the intellect, to the infinite godliness within. Now, then your second point is about the problem, let's put it that way, that meditation is not emphasized in the observant world. So you and I will have to change the observant world. There was a visitor to our synagogue over Simchat Torah that's in London, and he'd come from one Chabad synagogue at another part of London to our synagogue. Now, our synagogue, a little bit looks like that painting. When people have finished the service, they go down to the Kiddush, and there's a whole bunch of people left upstairs, singing, thinking, maybe walking up and down. And so the visitor from the other Chabad synagogue, he said, in this other Chabad synagogue, they serve really nice kugel at the Kiddush. And in your Kiddush, there wasn't any kugel. But in the other synagogue, they all come down to the Kiddush straight after the prayers. And in yours, you got a whole group of people upstairs praying. So we have to spread that in Chabad and beyond. And I did once give a talk to a very nice non-Hasidic synagogue about methods of contemplation. And I believe that these are areas that we have to publicize and popularize, find different ways of doing so. There's a whole movement in Stamford Hill where there's a very strong Haredi community of Belzers, Satmaras, and so on, run by a young friend of mine, Avremi Ruskin, and he has Hasidic gatherings. They study texts about contemplation and hopefully strengthening these values in the community at large. So that's something we have to work on for the future. And really, that's what Ariel is trying to do and his team.
And Kate, I'm mindful of the time and I'm mindful of the hour across the pond. I did want to ask, and I think in some sense you've already answered this, in our day of social media and the attention economy and the tremendous economic and political uncertainty that we're all living through, what is a message that you would leave us with in terms of the contributions of Jewish spirituality and Hasidism in particular to how mental health can be deepened and um, I guess that's the word I want, how we can find what the surfers call the deeper waters that lie
Yes,
beneath.
yes. I see the I've learned this from the people who I was working on doing therapy. The central thing that they valued, found most important, felt they'd been seeking the whole time was emunah, the idea that that, that godliness is here in us, in everything, continual creation, and this, if this, I think this is certainly what is meant by the term emunah, and what the clients felt aware of, and I think it's something that it would be wonderful to help increase and improve for everybody.
Very beautiful.
Mm.
What Kate says reminds me of the famous saying of the Baal Shem Tov, which is recorded in the book Toldat Yaakov Yosef. Ha'emunah hi hadvekut. That emunah, faith, is cleaving to God. In that early generation of Hasidism, everyone was seeking dveikut to a certain extent. They do now too in general Hasidic circles. And that sense of cleaving to God, it's something cerebral. And it's cerebral beyond cerebral. It's going beyond, it's going beyond mind. It's the point where we link with that which is beyond rationality. And studying one of the Hasidic texts, which is actually by the Rebbe Rashab, Reb Shalom Dov Ber Schneerson. His birthday is on Thursday this week, 20th of Cheshvan. So the Rebbe Rashab wrote this fascinating stream of discourses, which began in 1912 on Shavuot, at Tofrei Shayin Bet. And it continued for several years, developing these beautiful, profound ideas. And the Lubavitcher Rebbe launched the whole idea of a new edition of this book in 1976 and published it. And then it was republished several times, where further manuscripts were found. And he says that very striking thing, that by the fact that the person has emunah, has faith which transcends reason, their power of reason is strengthened. And this was very interesting. I was actually studying this with one of our granddaughters, studying by WhatsApp together. She's in the States at the moment. She's from Sweden. And she told me about a Swedish girl she knows who has become very religious. And her siblings say to her, "What are you doing being religious? If you believe in God, you're closing down your mind." And this was a beautiful answer in this discourse, that in fact, the ability to believe really activates the mind. And I think that the reason why Richard Dawkins had to have a kind of faith in evolution is because it goes against reason. And one has to have the ability to the eye and many examples of all different kinds show that the evolutionary concept of creation taking place, of existence of the different species taking place by chance, is irrational. It's not just chance. And to claim that it is means shutting down part of your mind. And emunah, that you say, you know what, the Torah says X, Y, Z, I'm going to go with that, opens one's mind. So, all
Thank
strength.
you so much, Doctors Loewenthal, Doctors Kate and Tali. Thank you very much for spending this time with us, for reminding us of the importance of opening the heart and opening the mind to that which is not constricted by reason, but that which flows beyond it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bottom
Thank you very
of
much.
my heart.
Thank
All the
you.
best.
It's a
Right.
real privilege to participate. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
I hope everyone will join us for our next For Bringing next month, and we will keep you posted.
Good to see you all.